They replaced me on my wedding day as if I were disposable. One moment I was slipping into my gown, hands trembling with excitement, heart full of dreams. And the next I was locked in a back room while my cousin walked down the aisle in my place. My own mother stood there watching it happen, cold and silent, like I didn't even matter. That day something inside me shattered. But I didn't stay broken. No, that was the day I stopped being their puppet, and started becoming the woman they'd lived to regret crossing. My name is Alana, and the version of me they buried under shame and silence didn't die. She evolved. And this is the story of how betrayal lit the fire that forged my comeback. I was born into a family where appearances mattered more than love. My parents were respected in the community, known for hosting charity galas, attending church faithfully, and parading their perfect image through social circles like a trophy. But inside our home, perfection was demanded, not nurtured. And I was always, almost enough. From the outside it looked like I had everything. But my mother, a woman so polished and poised, made it clear I would never be her pride. She said I laughed too loudly, dreamed too wildly, loved too deeply. "You're too soft, Alana," she would always say. "Too emotional. That won't get you far in this world." And when I fell in love with Marcus, a man I thought saw the real me, I believed I was finally choosing something for myself. Marcus wasn't perfect, but he made me feel seen. Or so I thought. We met through mutual friends, and he swept me off my feet with his charm, his ambition, and the way he talked about building a future. My family liked him, at first. But when they learned he came from a modest background, and that his rise in business was mostly self-made, their warmth cooled fast. My father called him unpolished, and my mother, well, she smiled to his face but told me behind closed doors, "He's fine for now, but you can do better." So I loved him. And when Marcus proposed, I said yes, despite my parents' growing disapproval. I should have known they were planning something. Something cruel. Something calculated. The weeks leading up to the wedding were tense. My mother kept insisting we include my cousin Betrayal in more of the planning. "Let her help you. She knows how to keep things elegant," she said. I didn't think much of it. Betrayal and I had grown up like sisters. But something had changed in her. She had always been the prettier one, the more confident one. I was the one with the heart. And somehow that made me easy to replace. On the morning of my wedding, I remember the coldness. My mother barely acknowledged me. Betrayal was unusually giddy, floating around like she was the bride. And Marcus, he hadn't texted me once that morning. My gut twisted, but I chalked it up to nerves. Then, as I was getting ready, two of my mother's staff came into the room. "We need you to wait in here for a moment," one of them said, guiding me into a smaller room off the side of the bridal suite. I stepped in and they shut the door behind me. I heard the lock click. At first I thought it was a mistake. I knocked, then pounded. No answer. Time passed. My phone was gone. It had been left on the vanity. And then through the small frosted window I saw it. A white gown. A veil. But it wasn't me. It was Betrayal. He was walking down the aisle. On my day. I don't remember screaming. I just remember the silence in my chest. The betrayal was so complete, so precise, it didn't feel real. And when I was finally let out, hours later, it was all over. They said I had a nervous episode, that I had disappeared, that Betrayal had stepped in to save the moment. But it was a lie. All of it. Carefully scripted to make me look unstable. And Marcus, he played along. Or worse, maybe it had been his plan all along. That night I disappeared. Not in the way they hoped, broken, ashamed, forgotten. No, I disappeared so I could rebuild. So I could rise. I didn't cry that night, not even once. Not because I wasn't broken, but because the pain had carved out something deeper than tears. It hollowed me into silence, and in that silence I made a vow. They would never get to write the ending of my story. I left town without a word, slipping away in the middle of the night with nothing but a suitcase and a mind full of shattered pieces. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't heal in the same place that tried to bury me. I headed to a small coastal city several hours away. Somewhere they wouldn't look, somewhere I could vanish and begin again. At first I barely spoke to anyone. I found a cheap room above a bookstore and spent my days shelving books and my nights journaling the pain I was too afraid to speak aloud. The owner, Mrs. Clara, was the first person in a long time who looked at me and didn't see a failure or a disappointment. She saw a girl who had been bruised by love and betrayal, and she gave me grace. Not pity, grace. "You've got fire in you, girl," she said one evening as I restocked romance novels. "The kind they try to snuff out when they're scared of what you'll become." And I held on to those words like a lifeline. I enrolled in online courses, determined to finish the business degree I had paused for wedding planning. I started freelancing, consulting for small brands, and gradually built a reputation. The more I worked, the more I remembered who I was before they tried to mold me into someone forgettable. I wasn't soft, I was strong in ways they couldn't understand. I didn't need their approval. I needed to rise on my own terms. So the scars ran deep. Every time I saw a bride on TV or heard the word wedding, my stomach tightened. But instead of letting it drown me, I used it. I poured the pain into purpose. I started a blog anonymously, The Phoenix Bride, where I told pieces of my story and offered support for women who'd been betrayed, abandoned, or cast aside. The response shocked me. Women from all over the country wrote back. Some had been left at the altar. Others had escaped toxic families. And all of them said the same thing: "Your story made me feel seen." That's when I realized, my pain wasn't a curse. It was a weapon. A tool. A voice for others still trapped in silence. 2 years passed. And by then I wasn't the girl locked in the back room anymore. I was the CEO of a growing brand consulting agency. I'd built something from the ashes they left me in. I even got invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference. My first time stepping into the spotlight since the wedding that never was. I stood backstage that morning, nerves fluttering in my stomach. But this time I wasn't scared. I wasn't small. I wore a white suit, a quiet rebellion, a symbol that I didn't need a gown or a groom to feel powerful. I opened my speech with a simple line. They tried to replace me on my wedding day. But what they didn't know was that I would replace the version of me who needed their love to feel worthy. The room went silent. And then came the applause. Later that evening, as I exited the venue, I saw a familiar face in the crowd. Marcus. He looked older. Tired. And for a split second I saw regret in his eyes. He approached slowly, like someone who knew he didn't have the right to speak, but needed to try anyway. "Alana," he said, his voice soft. "I didn't know what they were planning. Your mom said you left," she said. I raised my hand to stop him. "You don't get to rewrite the past, Marcus." You stood there. You watched her walk down the aisle. You married her. He swallowed. "It didn't last. Brielle and I don't care," I said, meeting his gaze, steady and calm. "I didn't come back to hear your apologies. I came back to show you what I became without you." And with that I walked away. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by the girl who was locked away. I had become the woman they tried to erase. And I was just getting started. When you lose everything, there's a strange kind of freedom in the ruins. I had no name to protect anymore. No family to impress, no fiancé to please. Just silence, heartbreak, and a fury that became my fuel. I spent that first week in a small motel an hour outside the city, crying through the nights and pacing through the days. The pain was raw, but I refused to let it consume me. I wasn't just grieving a lost wedding, I was grieving the version of me that begged for approval. That Alana was gone. I needed distance, clarity, and a new beginning. So I disappeared completely. I sold the vintage car my grandmother had left me, withdrew what little savings I had, and moved across the country to Seattle. No one knew where I went, not even my closest friends. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted transformation. For the first few months, I worked as a barista in a quiet little cafe tucked in a bookstore downtown. It was humbling, slinging coffee to strangers when just months before I'd been planning a high society wedding. But that job gave me something I hadn't felt in years: control. Each cup I made, each smile I gave a customer, it was mine. My decision. My pace. My life. But I wasn't meant to stay behind a counter forever. I had a degree in interior design, a dream I'd shelved to be the respectable daughter, the trophy wife. No. I was ready to chase it for me. I started taking freelance gigs online. Small ones at first, Virtual staging for real estate listings, redesigning cramped apartments, creating vision boards for clueless bachelors. My reviews grew. My portfolio flourished. And within a year, I launched my own brand, Reclaimed Spaces. Every design I touched told a story of rebirth. Of women reclaiming their space, their worth, their voice. And behind every brushstroke and fabric swatch, I wove in a little of myself. The girl who'd been locked away and replaced. I was no longer hiding. I was creating healing rising. Money started coming in. Then clients. Then press. A feature in a local Seattle lifestyle magazine brought a flood of attention. Suddenly, I wasn't just a designer. I was a name. A survivor-turned-success story. People loved the narrative. But what they didn't know was that my real story hadn't even begun. Because one day 2 years after the wedding that never was, I opened my inbox to a message that made my heart stop. Subject: requesting a consultation. Hi Alana. We're opening a new boutique hotel in Atlanta and looking for a fresh designer's touch. We came across your work through the magazine and believe your style could be a perfect fit. Would you be open to a preliminary conversation? Marcus J. Ellis, Managing Partner, Betrayal and Ellis Group. Betrayal and Ellis. Is that Betrayal? That Marcus. My hands trembled. Not with fear but with something darker. Something sharper. They had built a business together. A brand. My replacement and my former fiancé, thriving off the lie they'd crafted over my body. And now, without knowing, they were inviting me back into their world. I stared at the email for hours. I thought about deleting it. About blocking the sender. About pretending I never saw it. But then I realized. This wasn't a coincidence. This was the moment fate slid the matchbox into my hands, and dared me to strike. And I had never been more ready to watch them burn. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I studied the email like a map, one that led straight into enemy territory. My name, once discarded like it meant nothing, now shimmered in their inbox like a beacon. They didn't know it yet, but the woman they had broken had become the architect of her own rebirth. I responded with poise. Professional. Grateful. Open to discussion. Not a flicker of the storm beneath my skin. A week later, I was on a call with Marcus Ellis and his team. His voice hadn't changed. Confident, smooth, dripping with the same charm that had once made me believe in forever. He didn't recognize mine, not really. Not this version of me. And I didn't give him a chance to connect the dots. My camera stayed off. I let my work speak. They were impressed, especially Marcus. I could hear it in the way his tone shifted. He wanted reclaimed spaces badly. Their boutique hotel needed a modern, soulful touch. Something elegant yet grounded. In his words, timeless with a bite. He had no idea how sharp my bite could be. We signed a short-term consulting contract for the first location. The plan was to keep things remote. Weekly updates, design boards, a few virtual walkthroughs. I played my role flawlessly. I remained distant but engaged, polite but cool. Professionalism masked every ounce of the fire beneath my calm voice. It didn't take long for the inevitable to happen. 3 months in, they requested an in-person collaboration to finalize installations and make key on-site decisions. They were flying me to Atlanta. And just like that, I was going back to the city that had chewed me up and spat me out. I booked my own flight, stayed in my own hotel, and arrived dressed in quiet armor. Neutral tones, sleek hair, minimal makeup, but a confidence that could set glass on edge. I walked into the hotel's unfinished lobby and paused. There they were. Marcus and Betrayal. Hand in hand, laughing about something as if they hadn't ripped my world apart. When Marcus turned to greet me, the smile on his face froze midair. His eyes widened. It hit him instantly. Alana. Betrayal's face went pale. They hadn't connected the dots until I was standing in front of them. Real, radiant, reborn. I gave a soft smile. Mr. Ellis, I said coolly. Let's get to work. The days that followed were a blur of power plays and polite tension. Betrayal tried to act unaffected, but I saw it. The twitch in her eye, the way she couldn't meet my gaze for long. Marcus was worse. He kept finding excuses to talk to me alone, trying to bring up the past. I never let him. I stayed focused on the job. Professional. Efficient. deadly calm. But I made small, deliberate choices in my design work. Tiny details, like naming one of the suite's second chances. Or choosing artwork with phrases like "rise from ruins" and "the phoenix sleeps no more." They noticed. Oh, they noticed. And the final blow? The launch party. The press swarmed. Investors smiled. And right in front of the cameras, the lead investor pulled me aside and announced they wanted me to lead all future Betrayal and Alice hotel designs. Not Betrayal. Not Marcus. Me. I accepted with a gracious smile. That night, as guests danced and wine flowed, I stood across the room from them and raised my glass silently. They couldn't touch me anymore. But karma wasn't done. A few months later, a scandal broke. Someone leaked messages between Betrayal and a developer she was secretly working with, behind Marcus's back. Photos. Receipts. Even a contract. She'd been trying to launch her own line of boutique properties, using ideas from our designs. The board dropped her. The partnership dissolved. And Marcus? He was left trying to salvage a crumbling brand with no Betrayal, no credibility, and no more me. I'd already declined the extension. I had bigger things ahead. My name was trending in design circles. My studio expanded. I moved back to the West Coast not to hide, but to thrive. I bought my first home. One I designed myself. Every color, every piece of furniture telling the story of a woman who rebuilt from ash. And as life would have it, I found love again. It started slow, an architect I'd met on a design project. Kind, steady. Not flashy, not dramatic. Just safe, warm, and deeply respectful. He never tried to fix me, he simply held space for me to heal. We married in a garden ceremony by the sea. No big crowd. Just the people who truly mattered. Real love, real laughter, and a joy I had never known before. Years later we welcomed twin girls. And yet life had one more full-circle moment to offer. One afternoon, while sorting through old emails, I saw a message from Marcus's son. He was in college now. Still called me Mom in the subject line. He said he missed me. That he never forgot how I treated him. That I was the only person who made him feel seen. He asked if we could talk. Catch up. I smiled through tears as I replied. Because even after all the betrayal and pain, love always finds a way to remain. When the news broke, it was poetic. A week after the grand opening, Betrayal and Alice was trending, for all the wrong reasons. A whistleblower had exposed severe mismanagement, unethical vendor contracts, and unlicensed architectural decisions. Everything unraveled like a loose thread pulled too far. The press devoured it. Investors pulled out. The hotel's reputation crumbled. And at the center of it all stood Marcus and Betrayal, frozen in the storm they created. I didn't lift a finger to sabotage them. I didn't need to. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive in fire. Sometimes it whispers through the cracks of foundations built on betrayal. But while they fell, I soared. The buzz from the Atlanta reveal ignited a wave of new clients. One, a famous lifestyle influencer, invited me on her podcast. Another offered to sponsor my first design workshop tour across the country. And then came the TEDx invitation, Reclaiming Yourself, From Ruins to Reinvention. I stood on that red dot wearing a soft linen jumpsuit in front of hundreds, maybe thousands of viewers. But I wasn't nervous. I was rooted. Calm. Radiating something I'd never known before. Wholeness. I lost everything, I told the crowd. And in that loss I discovered myself. Not the woman groomed for perfection. Not the daughter desperate to belong. Not the bride-to-be clinging to an illusion. But the creator. The survivor. The me who builds beauty from brokenness. After the standing ovation, I walked off stage and checked my phone. A message from Betrayal. I saw the talk. I guess you won after all. I didn't reply. Because it was never about winning. It was about healing. A month later, I visited my childhood hometown. I walked past the old church where the wedding was meant to be. I sat on a park bench I hadn't touched since I was 16. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt like Alana. The real one. The woman who walked through betrayal, abandonment, and heartbreak, and came out not bitter but better. Not broken but bolder. I wrote a final letter to my mother that night. I never sent it. But it ended like this. You don't have to love me. You never did. But I love me now. And that's enough. I burned it in the fireplace of my lakeside rental. Watched the ashes drift upward like memories finally let go. Then I exhaled. Long and deep. Because that was the moment I realized. I hadn't just taken my life back. I had rebuilt it. On my own terms. And I would never shrink again. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or underestimated, let this be your reminder. You are not defined by what they did to you but by what you choose to become after. Share this if you've ever had to reclaim your power. Subscribe for more powerful stories of survival, revenge, and rising from the ashes.